Good morning, everyone. We studied this week the portion of Ki Teitzei. This portion is filled with the largest number of commandments, 74 commandments. There is something else unique about this week's portion, and that is the juxtaposition of mitzvot next to each other. And today we're going to see an example. In other words, the fact that God gave one commandment and next to it another commandment, there must be a relationship. This is going to be a side benefit to the whole discussion. There is a mitzvah that appears in this week's Torah portion, chapter 22, verse 11. The Torah says the following: "You may not wear Shaatnez, which is wool and linen together." Shaatnez in garments, taking wool that grows comes from an animal, from the sheep. Linen grows, it's flax, it's from the ground. Mixing them together, weaving them, creating a garment out of them is prohibited. I'm speaking about a talk of the Rebbe, Likutei Sichos, volume 29, the first talk of the Rebbe. Says the Rebbe the following: right after the prohibition of Shaatnez, this was verse 11. Verse 12 says the following: "You should make yourself twisted threads, tzitzit, and the four corners of your garment with which you cover yourself, even from a mixture of wool and linen." Right after the prohibition, this is an addition of Rashi, there's a parenthesis. Right after the commandment not to mix linen and wool, the next commandment is to create threads coming out of your four-corner garment, which is tzitzit or talit. They might be done from a mixture of both. Why? Because they come right after to say that they are the exception, that you are allowed to do that, linen and wool. And some tzitzit, you can see the linen, it's shiny, and this is wool, 100% wool. So, in addition, we have somebody here that also Bigdei Kehuna, the garments that a Kohen wore in the temple, the gartel, the avnet, was made out of linen, and the coat was made out of wool. So you have two places where you are allowed, or a mitzvah, to do Shaatnez, the exceptions. One in the temple, by the garment of the Kohanim, and two, by a tzitzit, which is a garment.
I thought it can't be one text, one garment.
Right.
Two separate things.
Right.
Each other.
So to put it over and use it for work is also an issue, number one. Number two, I think some of it was connected. And you know what? I should say, in addition to that, the high priest wore a garment over his garment that's weaved out of linen and wool together. Okay? Says the Rebbe that there are three types of mixture of two species that are forbidden, and they all appear in this week's Torah portion. We'll get to it. One is in the ground. You're not allowed to sow or plant two types of seeds together. Anybody is familiar with that? Called kilaim. Kilaim means a forbidden mixture. So if I plant tomatoes, I have to distance from the tomatoes a certain, depending on the type, 4 cucumbers, 4 watermelon, 4 sunflower. There cannot be wheat and barley and vineyard growing all together mixed. It's called kilaim. That's in the ground. Another type of kilaim there is in behemoths, in animals. Lo yisachrosh b'shoyer v'chamer yachdav. Do not plow a field with an ox and a donkey. And also behemtecho lo yitarbia kilaim. It's all in this week's Torah portion right after that. In other words, you are not allowed to bring two types, a horse and a mule, or a horse and a donkey together to create another species. So we have three. we have got ground, in the ground, there is a prohibition to plant together. In the animals, there is a prohibition to bring them together. And in the garments, there is a prohibition to wear them together.
The animals, can you have two?
Can it be all two? Can it be all two? Can it be all? Is it all clear?
No, the animals.
Standing next to each other, not a
Next to each other.
problem.
I mean, driving, pulling.
No,
That's
that's
what-
way better.
no,
That's a major prohibition.
You can't allow with two different animals.
That's what we just said.
One might want to eat, the other one has to work.
That's the reason that we say, but the issue,
Got
the
it.
prohibition is even to, the prohibition is actually not to mix, to put them together to create children. As we'll see later on something about this. Says the Rebbe, why only the kilaim of the mixture of Shaatnez, of linen and wool, are allowed, have an exception. And in the temple, it's a mitzvah. Why there is no exception to the garment, to the ground? Why there is no exception to the animals? You understand the question? Simple. Says the Rebbe, there is another mixture that is kind of, I'm going to give you now this part of the answer, it's kind of in the middle. And this is basar b'chalav, mixing milk and meat together in this week's Torah portion. Do not cook kid in his mother milk, which is the prohibition against cooking, not just eating, cooking together. The Torah does not tell us not to eat. The Rashi says, if you're not allowed to cook, how much more so you're not allowed to eat it? Because how can you have it? But the Torah in 3 places mention that, and always in the words are, don't mix them together, don't by cooking them. Says the Rebbe, the Gemara says in this week's Torah portion, where is it? The Gemara says, the Torah, the following, again, this is based on the text in this week's Torah portion. The Torah says, just a minute, I want to find it. The Torah says, do not mix milk and meat together. Do not bring into the house of God. Just a minute, I want to find it.
Eating better.
It says Reishis base, the Mechilta says, the Mechilta says, in Mishpatim, in the book of Deuteronomy, it says, Reishis bikurei ad moscha tavi beit Hashem Elokecha. The first of the choices, the bikurim, you should bring to the house of God. Lo yiseva shel gdi b'chalel imo. Do not cook a kid with its mother's milk. Says the Mechilta, why are they both in the same pasuk, in the same verse? Says the Mechilta, I would have thought that basar b'chalav in the temple is allowed. You're allowed to mix milk and meat. Comes the Torah says, Reshit bikurei ad moscha tavi beit Hashem Elokecha, bring to the house of Hashem, lo tevashel, comes after that the prohibition against not mixing milk and meat, to tell us that it's always across the board. There is no exception. Do you understand that?
Why would you think there would be an exception in the first?
The Mechilta says because the first half of the pasuk is about what you bring to the temple, which are unrelated. What would you think that you're allowed to?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just that's my question. So again, I'm going to summarize it. Says the Rebbe, there are 3 levels of the prohibition against mixing together 2 species. You have ground, kilaim in the ground planting, and you have animals putting together to create another animal. It's across the board, always forbidden. There is no exception. There is no place in the Torah that you would think something is allowed. Shaatnez, mix of garments, not only there is no exception, there is exception, and it's sometimes there is a mitzvah in the temple. It's also allowed in tzitzit. Then you have basar b'chalab, mixed milk and meat. There is no exception, always forbidden. There is no place you're allowed to. In the temple, you're not allowed to. But the Mechilta says the fact that the Torah put them next to each other, first the Torah says the bikurim must be brought into the temple, and right after the Torah says don't mix, don't cook milk and meat, it comes to teach us. I would have thought that in the temple it's an exception and you're allowed to. Comes the Torah and tells us, no, you're not allowed to. So ask the Rebbe, why are there three levels? Again, you have ground and animal on the one side, you have shaatnez of garments on the other side, and you have basar b'chalab kind of in the middle. I would have thought you're allowed to, but then the Torah makes sure not to. Why does not apply? Why is you don't see it with the other prohibitions? Yes, what's the question?
People come in with sacrifices.
Bikurim, they bring the first choice, the animals. I would have thought you're allowed to mix it. I suspected you're going to ask the question. I don't want to derail the discussion, but I have to respect you and respond. Do you know that they used to chaylev, certain fat is forbidden? Do you know that when they cooked the animal, they cooked it with the chaylev and the blood and many other parts?
Right.
What do you mean, right? Outside of the temple, it's forbidden. You have to remove it. How do I know that it's botel b'shishim? You know, I'm more scholarly. From the korbanos, the rabbis measure that the prohibited fat is less than 60th of the animal. That's where we learn. There are many. On Shabbos they would cook. They would put animals on the altar. They would add fire. I believe they would put. So there is many exceptions. You asking me where? A man had a kid, a goat, that is bringing to the temple, or if they slaughter that, and they want to cook the entire animal, and they cook it with the others, and then you have milk and meat. There is many other situations. All I care, you see, this is called technicality. All I care is that the Mechilta tells us that I would have thought that it's acceptable, and the Torah needs to exclude and say, no way. Why? In Mishpatim, in the book of Exodus, God says, the first of choices of fruit you bring to God, lo yisavashal, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Here you learn that even in the temple, when you bring gifts, you can bring anything you want. If you bring an animal or meat as a sacrifice, don't ever think that you're allowed to mix it with milk. In other words, it's kind of in the middle. Are we clear on those three categories? Ask the Rebbe, we need to understand why. Yes.
Then we remove the other then, so no one can get into it.
I'm not so sure you're allowed to, because if it's holy to God, oilo kolil, everything, all the other.
Then you can't cook it at all. And then becoming a person would bring a kid, a goat. That's
So perhaps it would be placed on the altar. Yeah. I don't know. This is not the topic of our discussion. So we're starting again to summarize what we studied. The Torah tells us Shaatnez is forbidden mixing wool and linen, and right after that the Torah says Gdilim ta'aselach, make fringes on the corners. Comes the rabbis tell us that the specs are there next to each other is because it's an exception you're allowed to. And we know in the Holy Temple, not only they were allowed to do garments with mixture, but there was a mitzvah. So when it comes to the other types of Shaatnez in the ground or by animals, there is no exception, always forbidden. So there is a fourth one, mixing milk and meat. It's the same. The Ramban, the following we're going to understand based on Ramban. Nachmanides, the Ramban says that milk and meat are also a similar of mixture of two opposites with the same category of eating. And I would have thought, the Mechilta says, I would have thought that in the temple there will be an exception. That's why the Torah puts it together. the prohibition against milk and meat. When it comes to when it talks about bringing gifts to God, to teach us that there is no exception. So it's kind of in the middle. Says the Rebbe, I can understand that based on what the Gemara tells us, that Yetzer Hara, ve'umois ha'olam, the evil inclination, the desire for evil, and the nations of the world mock the Jew about the mitzvah of Shaatnez. It's the only one they're making fun of. They tell a Jew, why are you serving God blindfoldedly? How can you do that? It makes no sense. Shaatnez, they say, is really defies common sense, defies understanding, and shouldn't be done. How come they are not making fun about kilaim, about planting two mixture of seeds together? It's a waste of land. How come they are not fighting about mixing two animals together so there is a third animal, a better DNA, a better featured animal should be created? We don't find them mocking it. The only part that they are mocking is Shaatnez. Says the Rebbe the following, and I'm going to give you the gist of it so that you are able to relate to it. When it comes to mixing into the ground, or when it comes to animals, what you are doing is changing and creating something new. That makes sense, it's prohibited. Because actually, if God is perfect, God could have created a different species. The fact that he did not want to,
They're alive.
he didn't do it because there is no need for it.
It's grafting.
So when grafting, so when I graft two animals, and the Ramban writes that the reason the Torah prohibited us to put in a barn, one barn, two types of animals, is not because of the issue of kilaim just being together, but by being together, it will lead them into mating and creating a new species. So perhaps plowing, Sheva Chamoel, says the Ramban, to plow with two species, Harry gave us the good reason, is because the donkey is going to get much tired, or the ox is eating much more and he's stronger, he can go farther, and the animal is going to be suffering. But Ramban gives us another reason. If you use them in the field to plow, at the end of the day, or to prepare them, you put them in the same barn. If they are together for a while, they will end up mating. And that will lead to something that's completely prohibited. Did you understand, Harry? I don't want to address side issues because as is, I have so much to cover. Okay, after that, please forgive me. Says the Ramban says, when it comes to a mixture of two animals, it completely makes sense because you are going against God. God created an ox, created a donkey. Putting them together to create a new animal is something new that God did not create in the 6 days of creation. The same is about plowing the field. When you plow in the field, you put wheat and barley together, you actually, as Harry called it, grafting them together. And there will be a new species grown. Is it wheat? No. Is it barley? No. What is it? Something new. If it's something new, it's wrong. There is no exception. I've seen many years back a liger. Anybody seen a liger?
They have them here.
And I asked, what's a liger? They said it's a lion and tiger. So I asked, who came up with the idea of, well, they said they were in a
They
cage.
came up with the idea.
We were in a cage together, and that's what happened. In other words, you're creating something new. It looks like a tiger, but it's a lion. Liger. I am here to say that those two, it's the first category, no exception. In nations of the world, says the Ramban, are not mocking at us for following this edict. It makes sense. However, when it comes to Shaatnez, what is Shaatnez? You mix milk and meat, you mix linen and wool, weaving them together. Can you take them apart? Of course. Can you separate them again? Of course. More importantly, did they create a new entity? The answer is no.
They're dead, the others are alive.
They were dead to begin with, thank you. And therefore, and they cannot be grafted together at birth because one is from the planting and one is from animals. Comes the nation of the world and say, Shaatnez, it's impossible to not do it. It's not right. You know why? Because they'll never created a new entity, something new that didn't exist before. They're always there, both, but you can speak strictly speaking about reality, no new reality. They can be surprised. As Ali said, they're dead. That's why, says the Rebbe, there is a time that God gave us an exception. That's why there is a time where you are allowed to, and we're going to go about one more step. Says the Rebbe, because they are actually different type of kilaim than ground and animals. Ground and animal, you carry a new entity. That's a no-no all across the board. When it's time, Shaatnez, God says, yeah, gdilim ta'aseloch. When it comes to tzitzit, you do a mitzvah, you're allowed to. When it comes to the Holy Temple, you serve God, not only allowed to, it's a mitzvah. So far, so good. Says the Rebbe, now we're going to talk about the middle one, the one that we had a thought that perhaps you're allowed to, but the Torah has to exclude. Basar b'chalav, milk and meat together. Says the Rebbe, milk and meat, you're not creating a new entity. So because you're not creating something new, nothing is created. It's the milk and the meat who are put together. Each one separately is allowed, but they are mixed together. So what's wrong? But the reason the Torah says, therefore, that there is no exception, even in the temple it's forbidden, is because you can never separate them. That's why the Torah does not say don't eat them, but the Torah says do not cook them together. And there is an opinion that if I put them together for 6 hours into water or vinegar, there should not be prohibited, but the Torah says it's forbidden because the taste of the milk is into the milk and the milk is into the taste. In other words, once you mix them together by cooking them, there will never be reverse technology. You cannot reverse engineer them and put them back together. And that's why, on one hand, they are not like ground or animals because nothing new is created. On the other hand, they are not like Shaatnez because you can never reverse that. So far, so good? Nice. Now I'm going to go into the Hasidic and spiritual aspect. So I want to summarize. We discovered there are 4 categories of kilaim: ground, animals, milk and meat, and Shaatnez. They're divided into 3 categories. Shaatnez is forbidden, but there are exceptions. Ground and animals, no exception, not even a thought to have an exception. Milk and meat, I would have thought that there is an exception, but the Torah says no exception. Says the Rebbe, the reason is, based on the Ramban Nachmanides, that's the only part the nations are making fun, is Shaatnez, because animals and ground, you are grafting and creating new entity. It makes no sense and there is no exception. Shaatnez, it's 2 entities, remaining 2 entities. They were dead, as Ali mentioned, and therefore they didn't create a new entity. And more important to me, you can separate them. And therefore, there is an exception. Then you have the third one, milk and meat in the middle, because you did not create new entity. I would have thought that there is an exception. That's why the Torah tells us now. You know why? Because you can never reverse the act. Did I cover it?
Yep.
So
Says the Rebbe. I would like to continue, unless it's directly related.
Right, which are the things that the nations mark? Shaatnez?
Only Shaatnez. They do not mark basar b'chalav. They do not mark kilaim of the ground, and they do not mark grafting animals. And the reason is based on Nachmanides, because this Shaatnez, it's 2 separate entities. Even when they are weaved together, there is a possibility to reverse it. And that's why they can't stand it. Do you understand that? Thank you. Now, says the Rebbe, the Bechaye, the Rabbeinu Bechaye write. By the way, I'm giving you the gist so that you are able to follow. The Bechaye says, there are two more points I want to share. I have to. One says the Bechaye that the reason things work here is because spiritually they represent two entities that should not be mixed together. So you have one that's kindness and one that's severity, chesed and gvura. Milk and meat, for example, milk is white, it's chesed, gvura is blood. How do you eat meat? You have to slaughter, kill something first. Milk, she's giving. It's something about giving. It's chesed. The same is about Shaatnez, linen and wool. One is from the animal, which is gevura. The other is linen, which is chesed. He said they don't work together. And the same is about the ground and animals, mixing animals, oxen, donkey, because they represent two opposites in spiritual realms. Ask the Rebbe, I don't understand. We know that the biggest achievements in life is peace, shalom. Oseh shalom bimromah. What does God do? Why is heaven called shamayim? Because it's made out of two words, Eish, Mayim, fire and water. I'm paraphrasing the Rebbe's talk. I'm adding this. Eish and Mayim came together and God made peace. So Shamayim is Eish Mayim. So take Chesed and Gvura, mix them together, is obviously a great mitzvah, a great virtue. Why is it suddenly forbidden? You understand the question? Says the Rebbe, and I want to get to the next point. So the Rebbe, there are two types of peace. There is one type of peace that will create something new and nullify the existence of the entity of now, and that's not acceptable. Also, peace, bringing together and totally nullifying, is only in spiritual and holiness. But in the physical universe, each entity will never be willing to nullify themselves. Therefore, when it comes to animals and the ground, where what you're going to do, mixing them together, is nullifying them completely because you're creating something new, then you are not doing peace. You are destroying what God created. When it comes to Shaatnez, because you are not killing it, living it the way they are, it's just that together they create a beautiful garment. In holiness, God says it's okay. That's why where are you allowed to? Tzitzit, to serve God. Big day kahuna. Ali, do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Basar bechalav, says the Rebbe, is in the middle. I would have thought because they are totally not nullified, that because it's still here, you have the meat, you have the milk, the cheese, but because you can never separate them, it creates a new entity, therefore there is no exception. And here is the punchline. Says the Rebbe that the Bechaye right, and this is being discussed, and there is so much to be talked, that le'asid lavoi, in the future, when Mashiach will arrive, basar bechalav will be allowed. Milk and meat will be allowed. That's what the Bechaye writes. Like the Medrash that tells us that a pig, ham will be allowed. Let's talk about basar b'chalav. Le'asid lavoi, Torah chadasha Ki Teitzei, new Torah come out from God, which is to allow milk and meat. As the Rebbe, why is the Bechaye say that you're allowed to on basar b'chalav? Why doesn't he say Shaatnez should be allowed? After all, they're all in the same category of taking two opposites and combining them. Says the Rebbe, in addition, the Bechaye goes on to say that Avraham Avinu, and the simple text, and I know what the Medrash says, he fed the angels basar b'chalav. It says, chalav, he gave him milk and cheese, and then he went ben abokar, he cut 3 tongues, etc. He fed them. The Torah, the Medrash says he did first milk, then meat. The Medrash says they are angels, they didn't really eat, whatever. But the simple text is that he fed them milk and meat. It says, Barech Chema v'chalav ben abokar shasa. He put 2 tables of milk and meat and meat. Some say, well, he provided him 2 choices and says, like my wife says, you want dairy or you want meat? He gave him both. But the Torah says that he fed them both. Says the Rebbe, because when the Mashiach will come, there will be such clarity because the spirit of evil, which try to mask ungodliness and try to convince you that this is okay, will be removed, meaning everything will become very clear as day. That's what it says. Everybody, all flesh eyes can see God. Meaning the clarity of the times of Mashiach will be so big, so clear, so bright, that even after you cook milk and meat, you can say this part belongs to the meat, this part belongs to the milk, and therefore it will be allowed. But when it comes to kilaim of the ground and the animals, it will create something new. That will never be allowed. Only milk and meat. Why? We thought there is an exception. Why there is no exception? Because you cannot reverse engineer them. You cannot tell which one is what. When Mashiach will come, you'll be able to, the clarity will be so bright that even milk and meat that will cook together, you can look at a piece of meat and say, here is a little milk. Here's a little flavor that came from the dairy, and therefore it's forbidden. I hope I made myself clear today.
Another reason for Mashiach now.
Ali, did you follow the lesson? So again, in this week's Torah portion, we read about Shaatnez of the garment, with exception. We read about animal mixture, and there is no exception. We read about planting in the ground or grafting, which is no exception. And milk and meat is also, I would have thought that there is an exception, but there is no exception. So there are three categories we learned. Why? Each one. We also discovered that in heaven, that it's in what the spiritual root of each entity that cannot be mixed, and the reason is because you're not allowed to nullify and completely destroy. Nullification, to bow down before God, is great, but don't destroy and create something totally different. That's no exception. If you keep the entity on its own in holiness, that's acceptable. That's why Shana is allowed. In the time of Mashiach, Basar Bechalav will be allowed. You know why? Because at that time there will be such clarity that you can see that what is milk, what is meat, and you'll be able to enjoy it. I hope I made myself clear.
What can you say about the-
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sei gesund, good Shabbos, everybody.
You quit